Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. We are at GearFest 2014 here at Sweetwater, and we are joined by Adrian Emsley from Orange Amplifiers.
How you doing, Mitch? You all right? Yeah.
Great to have you here all the way from England, right?
Yeah, that's it. Well, we came via Atlanta. You know, we stopped there for a couple of days, did some promo and stuff.
Right. So you're probably close to the farthest away that came to the show. I think we get some people from over in Europe.
Yeah, it could be. I'm from London, so yeah, I guess that's a trek.
Yeah, a bit of a. We appreciate you being here. Thanks for.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thanks for coming over. It's going to be a great event. We got beautiful weather today and lots of people coming in. So your title is Technical Director at
That
Orange.
is correct. Yeah.
What does that mean? What do you do there?
Well, kind of like design. Design all the tube stuff, all the old tube stuff, which is and obviously we do some solid state stuff as well. With the latest being tube stuff that's been adapted to op amps.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like rock verb circuit, but adapted to op amps, you know.
Okay.
Which we do as our Crush Pro.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for people that know what rocker verbs do,
right?
And they could go straight to the controls and they feel at home in the way it works, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's not a tube sound; it's close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little different approach. Yeah, right. Yeah. Now you've been with the company for quite a while.
17 years.
17 years, yeah. How did you get started there?
It was just doing, Orange was just doing a couple of reissue models at the time, and they just kind of brought it back. Like the registration kind of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Got that back. And this was in the mid-90s. And there was just a graphic and an overdrive, like a reissue from like the Pix and Tex period of the mid-70s.
Mm-hmm.
And I got hired as freelance to do some modifications, actually for Noel Gallagher from Oasis.
Sure.
He was in Oasis. And he wanted more crunch, more clarity, and he wanted to be able to run everything on 10 for 2 hours, because they used to play 2-hour shows. And so I did 18 changes to the circuit to enable him to do that. You know, I was just doing that freelance. And there's a few more players as well wanted some mods. So I started off doing mods for Orange, you know.
Okay.
And then I started full time about a year later, and set about designing some smaller stuff like 8015s, 8030s.
Were those the first products you worked on when you got to the full time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, did you have a electronics background before? Were you self-taught? Were you a musician? How did you get into the business?
Self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you just tore amps apart, learn how they work?
Yeah. I mean, from a very early age, my dad got me on the soldering iron when I was like in single figures there, you know.
Right.
And he was a really clever guy, you know. So he kind of, you know, so why doesn't it work?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we'd go through it and fix stuff. So, and then I was doing modifications throughout the 80s.
Okay.
Got a lot of amps, you know, around about the time when it was trendy to do modifications to existing stuff.
Sure.
Then restorations on vintage stuff, you know, like getting them back right where they've had mods or been serviced with different parts. Getting original parts and putting them back to as factory standard as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I used to warm up the filter caps and then put a working voltage through them for 3 days if they weren't spent to get the original ones sounding good.
Yeah.
Again, you know.
Yeah.
And things like that. A lot of care and attention going into that. And I kind of realised that it's not all about gain, it's about tone, you know, with this vintage stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started building vintage style amps just for a few players. You know, they weren't cheap. They were built like the way they should be.
Right.
And I kind of got approached by Orange from that, really.
Okay.
Know? So 98 was when I started full time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you started with the 8015?
8030 actually, and then obviously the 15 came off the back of that.
Mm-hmm.
I have to excuse this, I should have turned it off.
That's all right.
Yeah, it came off the back of that really, as an obvious, you know. They wanted to change the way they were going to look as well, and obviously I fought long and hard to not change that because it's a classic look.
Right.
It took me 7 years to get the hieroglyphics back.
Really?
You know, originally they wouldn't let me put them on them, you know. And then at NAMM show in Frankfurt, people would come up to me talking about the hieroglyphics, and I'd just take them over to the CEO. And over a period of a few years, this convinced him to come around, and I snuck them on a custom shop first. I got them on there, you know, and then I got permission for the custom shop, and then it was the first AD200 that went into factory production, because I used to build them all in-house, the original ones. The first one that went into factory production, I snuck them on the front panel, hoping he wouldn't notice.
Nice.
And then that was, and then I managed to get picks only back as well, which was good.
Right.
Good fun.
That's so fun, yeah.
Yeah. People like that look. So,
absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. So one of the kind of groundbreaking products I would say that you've worked on and brought out with Orange is the Tiny Terror.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for that come from?
The idea was, like, you got club venues that have like 4 bands on, and obviously you want to keep the changeover as quick as possible. You know, you don't want to be moving amps on and off all the time, especially the drum set. You know, you don't want to move that on and off. So I just thought, well, if you had this little tiny tube head, you know, I mean, most of the times venues like that, if you're playing overdriven, everyone's wanting power amp distortion, but they seem to have this malfunction in their head that says, but I want 100 watts as well. Do you know, so they, you know, people using 100-watt heads, they got 4x12. You phone up a band on the bill that's got that and just go, can I borrow you 4x12? It's only 15 watts, it won't blow it. You know, you turn up with this little thing in a gig bag and your guitar, you know, and just you think, oh, I want to drink after the gig. There's a party afterwards, you know. I don't want to have to drive. So you turn up with your guitar and your little gig bag. You put this on top of the 4x12. You got it on 10. Gain on about 5. You got a good AC/DC sound, you know.
Right.
And the guy with the 100-watt amp on 2 sounded like a chainsaw, and you got the tone of the night, you know, and you're just sort of like, and then you go on to the party, you know.
Right.
You just got these 2 things to keep hold of for the night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of idea.
Yeah, well, it was, but doing it all tube, you know, and like 2 stage as well, you know. It sounds like 3 because there's no tone stack, because the tone is actually on the power amp. It's like a filter on the power amp, you know.
Okay.
So obviously you've got no tone stack loading the signal down, so you get more gain through. And obviously the second gang of the gain part is changing the impedance of the second stage. So that it's pretty sweet all the way up through clean, crunch, heavy overdrive.
Right,
stuff,
right.
yeah.
I didn't know the tone stack was actually not in the
and the
cram
volume,
section.
yeah.
Interesting.
Which is why you wouldn't put an effects loop on those amps, because the circuit is not. There's not really much preamp distortion going on. It's all in the push-pull part of the amp. It's all after the phase inverter. That's where it's all happening, you know. So if you was to put an effects loop on there, you'd have to use transformers, and then come out after that to do it properly. If you wanted to do an effects loop by modern standards, you know, like a buffered one.
Right.
Which, if you're going to do one, you might as well do something that's really good. That's how you do it. But that would take up space and be expensive. So
kind of defeats the purpose.
Well, yeah, but some people still ask for them, and they put them after the treble, after where the treble control would be if it was there. But obviously, you're not really going to get. It's not going to work properly as an effect. So you might as well just put whatever you're going to use in front of the amp. You're not really going to get much of a benefit by inserting it sort of halfway through the amp. So, but that's not what it is. It's not what it's for. It's you know, a Tiny Terror. It's simple. It's all about simple. You know, it's all about having very little knobs. In fact, all the Oranges, I'll try and put as little knobs on as possible, as little amount. You know, because some people's amps they could have 20 knobs on them, and you probably find those settings haven't moved for for like 6 years or something. Do you know what I mean? They could almost super glue the whole lot down. Do you know, just so it doesn't get changed. You know, it's quite often like that. Once people got that, they tend to just leave it and concentrate more on playing the tune.
Right, which the Orange Amps let you do because they're so simple to operate.
Well, that's it. I try and do sort of very few knobs that do a lot, you know, but at the same time, it's hard to get a bad sound. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can go extremes, but it will still work. You know, some stuff, obviously, if you set it a certain way, takes you beyond the realms of musicality, you know, in every respect.
Right.
Or usability.
Yeah.
So obviously, I try and have very few controls. But they do a lot, though.
Right. Which, as a player, that's great because they're so easy to set up.
Yeah, it stops them getting sidetracked.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Exactly. Plug in and play.
Yeah,
right.
That's really what it's about. And I didn't want to make them longer either, because they've always been 19-inch, and it would look a bit odd if we went longer.
Right.
To get more controls.
Right.
So
right.
It makes it hard to lay out though, because there's the less chassis space. So doing CAD layouts and stuff is much more of a challenge to try and cram 2-4 stages in of
more
tube
space, yeah.
in that space with power stage is hard. You just have to really think about it when you do it. You know, it's not easy. It's good though, because the only way to do it is to minimise any feedback in the circuit. So by default, you've done that. Just getting it working right.
Right.
On an Orange, you've done that. So the amp ends up sounding better because you've done that all the way through. You know, so it kind of it's hard, but it's going to sound better than everything else. You know,
right.
Which is what it's all about for me.
So what is your favorite amp that you guys make?
I mean, I use Tiny Terrors myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't play that much these days. You know, I get up every week, do some covers and stuff these days with some chaps. You know.
Sure.
It's one of those bands. Anyone who's in town gets up. You know, which is fun.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, 15 watts for me in a club's fine. I like power amp distortion. I like what the speakers do with your fingers.
It has a different feel, doesn't it?
And the output stage.
Right, it's not so compressed the way the preamp distortion can be.
Well, there's just so many shades of distortion, of clean through. There's just so many steps that you got basically from the way you play.
Right.
You know, just through to, you can go completely clean, through to serious overdrive, just from playing.
And with your volume knob.
Yeah, again, it's like the whole thing of, I like guitar volumes as well. I'm always on mine, you know. It's probably the best gain control there is.
Right.
It's right there.
That's
you
great.
can sort of get to it, you know. But that's just me. I'm old school with that stuff, really. I obviously have to cater for people who want more features. You know?
Yeah, sure. And you make a range of amplifiers that cover it.
That's right. Yeah. You have to do that. So you can't make the amp for you.
Right.
That's a big mistake.
Right.
You have to kind of step out of your shoes and just think what people are, you know, players are, what would be useful to players in a situation. I always think of a situation when I'm designing, always, and try and keep it simple. The same goes for foot switches, you know.
Right.
We use just jacks. We don't do any 5-pin DIN kind of foot switch. Because I mean, you step on that on the road, that's finished. You're not switching your amp.
Right.
You know, unless you can find another one of them somewhere. Depending on where you are on the planet at that time, that might not be doable. Whereas jacks, 1/4-inch jacks, you can solder a lead up, or you know, it's just a 1/4-inch jack and a thing that joins 2 wires together. You know, an LED to tell you what channel you're on, phantom powered. You know, it's that simple. So any latching foot switch will switch the Orange amps, which I figured, you know, it's not for us. It's not about selling foot switches. It's so you can use any latching foot switch, but it's about supporting the player on the road if they get into a situation in the real world.
Right.
You know, so you kind of have to put yourself in that situation and go, well, what would happen if? I always like stuff to be serviceable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, by any decent tech on the planet. If they get something in needs a quick service, I want to make it easy for them.
Right.
You know?
Right. That's great. Keep the player foremost in the
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. It might just be something stupid like the preamp tube got dead on one side or something, you know.
Sure.
Or microphonic.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that's important. So I always design with a view to serviceability wherever possible.
Right. Well, it pays off because the amps are great. They sound great. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, it's great
Thanks for
to
coming
be
out
here.
to GearFest. I think we're going to have a great time.
Yeah, it's fantastic looking little show. Yeah.
And you're going to be hanging out in the Orange booth.
Yeah.
Talking about amps
and
showing some of the stuff that's going on. So
that's great.
Great opportunity to actually talk to somebody who makes the amps, who actually designs them. You don't get to do that every day. So pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I normally wear a white coat.
Yeah.
You know, I was going to bring it actually. I was going to bring my white coat.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, Dr. Adrian.
Well, for like obviously when I'm at HQ designing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've got my white coat on there.
Right. Adrian, thanks so much.
Excellent.
We're glad to have you here.
Cheers. Have a great show.
You too. I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.